Kira and welcome to another video. I'm really excited about today's video because I've got something a little bit different that I hope is going to be really fun. A couple of weeks ago I decided to ask for you guys to send me bookish would you rather questions on Instagram, and you came through with quite a lot. I've really tried not to look at them much since they came up so that I can have like an authentic and unplanned reaction and just respond to exactly how I feel as I read them out here and now. But I have lots of fun bookish questions to get through, so without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm just going to be looking at my phone because that's where all of the questions are, obviously because they were on Instagram. But the first one is, would you rather own only books that you've read or only books that you haven't? That's really difficult because there are so many books that I have read that I love, but then I also love reading new books, and so would I only ever want to be able to have books on my shelf that I've already read? I guess I would rather own the books that I've already read because I know that I like them, and then I guess that I can read books I haven't already read but borrow them from like the library or something, and then if I like them I can own them. I don't know if that's a loophole, but that's the one I'm going to go with. Okay, so next up we have, would you rather a soft with all character or a rude with all soft for only one character? I'd probably say soft with all. I don't really like mean people. Fiction or non-fiction? Definitely fiction. I'm trying to get into reading more non-fiction, but honestly, it's not going that well because I still have only read like a couple of non-fiction books this year, so fiction is definitely my thing. Then we have ebook or audio. Now, to be honest, I don't actually use either ebooks or audio very frequently. I don't have an e-reader, so ebooks are not very easy for me to get hold of because I wouldn't want to read something on my phone because I feel like that would just be a proper pain in the arse. And then audiobooks are just something I've never really gotten into. I've only ever listened to one audiobook, which was actually a non-fiction, and I did enjoy it, but it's something that I haven't really gotten into properly. However, if I was choosing between ebooks and audio, I think I'd go for audio because in my opinion, ebooks just give you the same experience as a physical book, only you would just be reading it on like an e-reader rather than in an actual book, and I don't have an e-reader and I don't really necessarily want one because I enjoy reading physical books, whereas with an audiobook I do feel like you get a different experience and it's like bringing the book to life in a completely different way, and so I feel like if I was to have to choose, audiobooks would definitely give me a more interesting experience than an e-reader. Then we have hardcover or softcover. Definitely paperbacks. Softcovers are definitely what I go for. I hate hardbacks. Morning or evening reading session. Probably morning because I'm not a nighttime person, so whenever I try and read in the evening, it sounds like a great idea, but then I end up falling asleep, basically. Ooh! Would you rather face Umbridge or Sauron if you had to? Now, just to clarify and give some context for anyone who doesn't know, I feel like most people will know who Umbridge is, but she is a character from Harry Potter, and then Sauron is like the big villain in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I would definitely rather face Umbridge because she is just a not particularly nice witch, and yeah, she's horrible, but I don't feel like she's overly dangerous, whereas Sauron is an extremely powerful evil force, and I just don't really fancy my chances in that one. Okay, would you rather be the main character of a romantic novel or a mystery novel? I'd say probably romance. Now, I love reading mysteries, and I'd say that on the whole, I probably prefer reading mysteries to reading romances, but mysteries are often a lot darker, and the things that the main characters in those books go through isn't always that pleasant, whereas with a romance, you know that pretty much in every single case, it's going to end well, so I definitely would rather live in a romance. Would you rather have your favourite book made into a horrible movie or not made at all? Probably not made at all, because if I enjoy it already as a book, it doesn't necessarily need to be made into a film, and even though it's really nice when books are made into films, it's only really nice if they're made into good films, and so I guess if it's going to be a horrible film, probably just not bother. Would you rather only be able to read Lord of the Rings or only be able to read Harry Potter? I'm assuming, is that like only, like that's the only books you can read ever, or just out of those two? If we're going with the dramatic one, which is those are the only books you can read ever, then I'd probably have to go for Harry Potter because First of all, there are more of them, so that just gives you a little bit more variety because you've got to switch between 7 books instead of only 3 like you'd have in Lord of the Rings. And then also I do feel like they're a little bit easier to get into. I did really enjoy Lord of the Rings, but it's not light reading and something that you can just get into for fun. And I also feel like it's purely just fantasy, which is really nice when you're in the mood for that. But if you're only able to read those books ever, you kind of want something that has a little bit more of everything. And I do feel like Harry Potter has that a little bit more. Although, to be perfectly honest, if I could only read either of those series, I do think that I'd end up getting bored of reading very, very quickly. Oh no, I hate this. Got a couple of this theme, I think. So the next two is be only able to read classics or only able to read new releases, and then someone else has said basically the same thing, which is spend all your money on classics or spend all your money on new releases. Now, I'm probably more likely to spend my money on classics because I love buying beautiful classics and there are so many covers that I absolutely love, but then would I only ever be able to read classics because I do love reading new releases as well? I'd say I'd probably have to go with new releases, sad as it is, because I'm assuming I could keep the classics I already own and therefore I could still read them but then just have new releases as well, because I just love looking out for new books and I love reading books of all kinds of genres that don't necessarily always get reflected in classics, so I don't think I could just read classics. And then someone else said, would you rather only read book series or only read YA? I would probably say book series because I enjoy being able to get into a series and follow characters over quite a long period of time, and obviously you have YA book series as well, but in this case I'm guessing they mean adult series. And then only read one genre, or you can read every genre you want but you can't read your favourite. So pick your favourite genre and that's all you can read, or everything else. Probably pick my favourite. It's my favourite for a reason, I guess, so I'd probably stick to contemporary because that's my favourite, and then I feel like I'm still getting quite a bit of variety, because I feel like it would be sad if you could read everything but you knew you couldn't read the books that you were going to love the most. And then this one is date Mr. Knightley or date Mr. Darcy. So we have, of course, Mr. Knightley from Emma and then Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, and that is without a doubt going to be, any guesses? Leave it in the comments down below if you think you know who I'm going to say. It's Mr. Knightley, 100%. I'm sorry for any Pride and Prejudice fans out there, but Emma is a superior book and Mr. Knightley is a superior love interest. Full stop, no question about it. Only be able to read your least favourite book over and over again or never read again. At that point, I would have to say goodbye reading, because reading is something that I do for fun because I enjoy it, so to force myself to read something that I don't like just seems really, really counterintuitive, so I guess in that case I would have to say goodbye to reading. Okay, next up we have only read short books or only read long books. I'd probably say short books, and actually I often find myself being really impressed with short books when they manage to pack a punch in only like a really short amount of pages. And I don't necessarily think like length is reflective of quality. That's not to say that there aren't some amazing long books out there, but I think on the whole I enjoy being able to tick off lots of different things from my TBR and also to experience loads of different stories and worlds, and obviously reading short books allows you to do that a lot more easily. And then my lovely friend Carolyn, who I thought was a friend but based on this question is actually really evil, has asked me would I rather date Connell Waldron, who is from Normal People, or Jess Mariano, who is from Gilmore Girls. Now Jess and Connell are two of Carolyn and I's favourite characters. We both absolutely love them and are kind of in love with them, and so that is like the most difficult question ever. But I think I'd have to probably say I would go for Jess Mariano, because I've been a Gilmore Girls fan for so many years and Jess has always been my favourite part of Gilmore Girls. And although I absolutely do love Normal People, I feel like, you know, Connell and Marianne are meant to be together, so it wouldn't be right for me to sweep in there. Whereas, you know, if you've watched Gilmore Girls, you'll know that Jess is a little bit more open, so I feel like it's a little bit easier for me to get in there. Okay, would I rather burn all of my Bronte books or all of my Austen books? Now, honestly, I don't want to burn any books, but this is Would You Rather, so I guess the point is that it's difficult. I'd have to say I'm going to have to get rid of all of my Bronte books and put them on the bonfire, because although I have enjoyed Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, which are the two Bronte books that I've read, I haven't enjoyed them as much as the Jane Austen books that I've read, and I've also read and enjoyed a greater variety of Jane Austen books, because I've read 5 out of her 6 novels so far, and so I feel like it would be a lot harder for me to part with them than it would be to part with the 2 Bronte books that I've got. And then, would you rather read one really good book or lots of okay books? I guess that's like quality over quantity, so I would rather have read less but have really, really enjoyed them, because if you read loads but they're just kind of average, you end up just feeling a little bit like demotivated, because it seems like the effort that you're putting into reading is kind of not being rewarded. So I definitely would rather read less but have them be books that I really, really enjoy. Oh my god. This is a funny one. Okay, would I rather read erotic fiction out loud on public transport, or have someone tell me the ending or plot twist of my most anticipated read of the year? Now, a confession about myself is that I actually love spoiling things for myself. I don't know why it is, but I always have. When I was younger, I would sometimes read the last pages of books first, then go back and read everything else, and I just get a lot of enjoyment out of knowing what is going to come. I often do that when I'm thinking about watching a film. I'll go to Wikipedia and read the plot summary, and then I can watch the film and know that I'm really going to enjoy it. So sometimes actually knowing what the plot twist is actually helps me to enjoy something more, because I feel like I'm more confident that I'm going to enjoy what I'm reading or watching. I don't always do it. I've definitely grown out of it a little bit as I've become a mature grown-up, and I don't always spoil things for myself, but I'm not one of those people that is really, really against getting spoiled. I always try to not spoil things for other people, because I know that people don't like being spoiled, but for me personally, I don't get offended if someone tells me something about something I'm planning on reading or watching, because if anything, that just kind of confirms whether or not it's something that I'm going to enjoy or whether it's something that I'm not going to enjoy. So in this instance, I feel like I've rambled on with that one, but I would probably rather save myself the embarrassment of reading erotic fiction out loud on public transport and have someone tell me the ending of my favourite book or most anticipated book of the year, because I don't really mind spoilers that much. This is a horrible question. Would I rather never read again or never do yoga again? I don't know. I obviously love reading, and I've loved reading for literally my whole life, so reading is a long-time companion of mine. Yoga is definitely more new for me, but it's now part of my job because I'm a yoga teacher, and also yoga is like my favourite and pretty much only regular form of movement. It's something that I do like multiple times a week, and I would be really sad to not be able to do yoga. But also, I don't think I could see myself as being someone who doesn't read. So I guess I'll just have to find a new favourite form of movement. Maybe I'll get into like Pilates or something, which is similar to yoga, but not quite. But I'm not happy about that. I don't know. I feel really uncomfortable because that is like such a hard question. But yeah, I guess never do yoga, but really, really sad about it. Would I rather books be missing the first page or the last page? Like I just said, I like spoiling things, and when I was younger I would sometimes read the last page first, and I feel like the last page is usually more important because the first page is kind of setting things up, but you don't often get like a huge amount of information on the first page because you're just being introduced to things, and I feel like you could start a book even like a few chapters in and still pick up the general gist and figure out what's going on, whereas I feel like the last few pages are where things get tied up and you get the really important information. So I would rather books be missing the first page and then you get the full conclusion at the end. Only read books picked for you by strangers, or only read books that are mentioned by TV characters. I think reading books picked by strangers could be really fun and a really interesting way to like get exposed to lots of different styles of books, whereas I feel like in TV shows the kinds of books that get mentioned tend to be classics, which I do like, but I feel like you'd definitely be limiting yourself to a lot less variety in what you'd read because they kind of pick the same kinds of books, and TV shows don't necessarily mention books that often. So I feel like Strangers would be a little bit more of an interesting option here. Oh, why is everyone so... This is so difficult. Meg has asked me, would I only read normal people for the rest of my life or never be able to read a Sally Rooney book again? I guess I'd have to say never read Sally Rooney again, because as much as I love normal people, it's a pretty short book. So if I was only going to be able to read that for the rest of my life, that would be like really easy to get bored of, even though I love it so much and can't see myself getting bored of it. I also have never had to read it constantly forever, so I guess that I'll just have to say goodbye to Sally Rooney. Read only classics or only contemporary? I think I'd have to say contemporary, because although I love classics, that would mean I'd never get to read a new book ever again. I'd only be able to read books that had already been published, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I do like that variety, and I feel like I'm more likely to get the variety I'm looking for in contemporaries. Ew. Have ants crawl out from every book that you read, or drop every book you read in water? I guess I'm going to be dropping books in water. Maybe after I read them, or like, that could work. Read them, drop them in water, set them out to dry, put them on the shelf. I think we can make that work. Would you rather only read Jane Austen novels or never get to read one of her books? I guess I'd never read Jane Austen, because although I love her books, 6 books for the rest of my life is just not really enough. 6 complete books. I know she has some other things as well, but 6 complete novels is not going to keep me going for that long. Normal people or conversations with friends? This is the ultimate question I've been asking myself all year long since I read both of Sally Rooney's books. I keep weighing it up and trying to decide, and it's so difficult, but I think on balance I do actually like conversations with friends slightly more than normal people. And I can't really put my finger on why, but I just slightly connected with those characters more and found that plot a little more enticing, but like only marginally, because I really loved both of them and they were both 5-star reads. But I think if I had to choose, I'd probably say Conversations with Friends. This is an easy one, thank God someone's been kind. Quit YouTube or quit Goodreads? I'd definitely quit Goodreads. I actually haven't been a Goodreads user for very long. I only got Goodreads after I started BookTube, because I saw people talking about Goodreads goals, and before that I'd never really come across it. And I do like Goodreads because it is fun to keep track of your goals and rate books and just sort of keep track of everything that you've read. However, I've been a user of YouTube for a really long time, and obviously then have started my own YouTube channel, and I think I would miss YouTube a lot more, whereas Goodreads is fun, but it's not really an essential part of my life. And I went for, gosh, like 18 years or whatever, like no longer, like 21 years of my life without using Goodreads, and so I think I could cope with not knowing how many books I'd read in a year. So yeah, I'll quit Goodreads. Only reread books for a year or only read books by the same author every month for a year? I'd reread books for a year. I think that would be a fun challenge actually, to have a year where you go back and read books that you've already read, see how your thoughts change, return to old favourites, and also maybe give other books that you hadn't liked before another chance. So actually I think rereading books for a year would be quite nice, and then obviously after that you can go back to reading whatever you want. Then we have only read non-fiction for a year or not be able to read more than 10 pages a day. I think I'd go for not reading more than 10 pages a day. I obviously wouldn't read as much, but I would still be able to read greater variety, whereas I don't think I'd be happy if I could only read non-fiction. Classics or YA for the rest of my life? So I've already compared classics and contemporary, but I think if it came to classics and YA, I might be inclined to go for classics, because I don't read a huge variety of YA, and although there's definitely some great YA books out there, I don't think I'd want to be limited to just reading YA. Ooh, this is a good one. Would you rather be Daphne du Maurier for a day or be one of her characters? I would definitely rather be Daphne du Maurier. Her characters live through some pretty tragic and dark circumstances, so I definitely don't think I'd want to be a character in one of her books, but I would love to experience what it was like to be a talented author, literally any talented author, especially who writes books as gripping and compelling as Daphne du Maurier's. So to be able to be her for a day and have an insight into that life would be incredible. Oh, this is cute. Would you rather read outside in the sun or cuddled up in a blanket on a rainy day? Definitely rainy day. I love that autumn aesthetic of getting cozy and reading a good book inside whilst it's raining outside. Ooh, would you rather complete a lengthy classic and cross it off your TBR, or be able to read 5 shorter books? Definitely 5 shorter books, and that's probably why my classics TBR continues to grow, because classics do have a slight tendency to be on the longer side, and I do just love being able to tick off more books. And I have read longer books that I've really enjoyed, but they just feel like a commitment, and when you're trying to read in amongst all the other things that you have going on in life, it does feel a little bit disheartening when you're reading a long book to take so long to get through it. So I think I'd rather read the 5 easier reads. Be able to read Jane Eyre or Pride and Prejudice for the first time. I would say probably Pride and Prejudice, because that was one of the first Jane Austen books that I ever read, and I didn't love it as much as I expected to, but I've since gotten a lot more into Jane Austen's writing, and I've enjoyed some of her other books a lot, and so I'd be really intrigued to see now whether my opinion of Pride and Prejudice would have changed, and so I'd definitely be interested to read that one again for the first time and just see how I feel about it. Not read during summer or not read during winter? I would definitely say not read during summer. Sometimes in summer I find it really, really difficult to read, because I think when it's hot outside and the house is really humid and it's just like sunny and you feel really sweaty and gross, it's really hard to get comfortable and read. And also there are so many other things to do outside to kill time in summer that I feel like I actually don't end up reading as much in general. Whereas in winter, it's cold outside, it gets dark really early, and there's way less things to do outside, and so I think spending more time inside reading is definitely more common. So I would rather not read during the summer and do a lot more reading in the winter. Would I rather write poetry or prose? Definitely prose. Although poetry can be really beautiful, it's not something that I typically read that much of, and so I don't have a huge amount of interest in learning to write it really well, whereas I obviously read a lot of books and love reading prose, and so I'd love to be able to write it as well. Take part in the Hunger Games or the Battle of Hogwarts? I'm going to go with the Battle of Hogwarts, because I feel like my chances there are a little bit higher. First of all, I'd be a wizard, so I'd have a wand and have magical abilities, which I think definitely helps. And also, it's not necessarily like about a one-on-one killing individual people type of thing. It's more just consequences of like the good against evil and that kind of fight, so it's a lot larger scale. And I feel like for that reason, a lot more people make it through safely. Whereas in the Hunger Games, the specific aim is that you've kind of got like a group of other people who are specifically trying to kill everyone. And so your chances are a lot slimmer, even though there's less people to fight against. Everyone specifically wants to kill you. And so I feel like I'd have better chances in the Battle of Hogwarts. Okay, so next up we have, would you rather live in the worst or scariest book you've read, or only be able to read really bad books? I'm trying to think about the scariest book I've read. I think the book that has scared me the most, and I don't tend to get that scared by books, is probably The Shining. That's kind of the place that I would least want to be, because in like a hotel with less people there, you're kind of trapped inside and everyone starts going a little bit unhinged, and there's also paranormal elements and you feel like the hotel is trying to kill you. That's probably like the most terrifying experience of reading. So I would not want to live in The Shining, absolutely not. So I guess I would just be reading bad books. Then we have, would you rather only read new books but not be able to read the last chapter, or only read authors' books that you've already read? And so can I read the books, leave the last chapter, and then just get someone else to tell me how it ends? Because I don't think I would only want to reread books for the rest of my life. So I guess I'll just have the majority of the reading experience and then just miss out on the last chapter. Although I don't like that, because I would want to know how it ends, but at the same time, I'd rather still be able to read more new stuff. And then the final question we've got is, would I rather date Connell or be best friends with Marianne? They're both such interesting characters, and I feel like they'd both be really interesting to spend time with. I do think Marianne would be an interesting character to get to know, because she does have such a wall up around her, and I feel like if you broke through that and were a really good friend, she would be like a great person to be friends with. So I'll probably say best friends with Marianne. And that is the final would you rather question. Some of those were really, really difficult, and I'm still not confident in some of my answers, but that was really, really fun, and also really interesting to get an insight into all of your minds and the evil things that you made me choose between. but I definitely had a fun time sort of challenging myself to figure out which I would actually rather do, because like I said, some of those were really, really hard. I hope you've enjoyed hearing my like deliberations and seeing which answers I've chosen, and I'd also love to know if there were any of them that you found really difficult to choose between and which sort of answer you decided to go for. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.